Hello, everyone. Welcome to the in-person audience today. Thank you for coming to CSIS for this event. To those online, thank you for joining us. My name is Clayton Swope. I'm the Deputy Director of the Aerospace Security Project here at CSIS. And today we're going to be talking about NASA's Moon to Mars roadmap, charting the next year. With me today is the Deputy Associate Administrator for the Moon to Mars program, Amit Kshatriya. Also, Tom Culligan, he's the President of Ascent Public Policy and Strategic Communications. And then Neal, he's the Executive Director for Space Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So we have about an hour together. We'll have a discussion on stage, then we'll take audience questions. So if anyone is interested to ask a question, if you're in the room, you could scan the QR code. If you're online, you can look at the event page and find a link to ask a question. So just kind of to frame what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be talking about the moon and Mars. We actually did find Amit. He is an official at NASA that does have both of those words in his title, so we thought that would be an appropriate person to have today for this discussion. We're going to learn a bit about the state of Moon to Mars at NASA, what that even means, what that encompasses, what the challenges are that the program's facing. Seeing how maybe that looks different today than it has in the last few years, and just looking on the horizon, what kind of speed bumps and what kind of issues are on Amit's team. We're going to get, I think, a perspective from industry from John, and Tom's going to bring a little bit of perspective from industry, but also his time on the Hill. Maybe he can shed some light on what kind of discussions are going on right now in Congress about Moon to Mars. So with that, I think I'll just kick it off with a question. Actually, I'm sorry. How about we go around? I'll just ask everyone to just give a little bit about themselves first. So Amit, if you don't mind, just maybe tell us a bit about what you do at NASA and your role.
I'm happy to be here. Really great to talk to this community too. It's been a long time coming, I think. I've been in the agency 20 years. I started right after the accident, the Columbia accident. It was a pretty harrowing time for all of us. My first assignment was actually to read the Accident Investigation Board report. But since then, I worked. The agency has recovered incredibly well. We finished space station. I was part of that, and then I was part of the program over there, and then was asked not to, but three years ago, to come over and help the team working on exploration. So most of my career has been in 18 years in building space station, but since I've been able to be a part of this thing, it's been just incredible. What I see that's common, and also what's different. So it's great.
Tom Culligan. So I spent about a decade on Capitol Hill, most of that time working for the chairman of the subcommittee that funded NASA. So I was there as we sort of stood up what's now the Moon to Mars, elements, a lot of those, as well as the commercial crew program and kind of getting ISS into operations mode. Then I spent time working with a lot of startup companies in industry, doing government relations for them, and then led government relations for Boeing's NASA space programs during some eventful years, and then spent the last couple of years at RTX, the company formerly known as Raytheon, working on space and aviation. And now back out working with a range of stakeholders.
Good afternoon, everyone. Neal. I'm the Executive Director for Space Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So I represent all the Chamber's aerospace and space companies, and really what we think about the Chamber is being an advocate for industry with the government, both on the regulatory side, legislative side, as well as the customer side, and thinking about how we can create the more opportunities for our companies to work with the government, grow, and create jobs for Americans. Thanks,
Okay, yeah, thanks. So back to the discussion. So Amit, my thought right off the bat was just, for the audience, I'm sure a lot of folks are knee deep in this and know, but for those that aren't, what is encompassing of the Moon to Mars program at NASA? What all falls into that bin specifically? And then kind of just give us a sense of where you've been, and then maybe where you're going to go in the next year and into the years to come.
Yeah, the agency's approach to the Moon to Mars kind of objectives and the overall architecture is not just limited to exploration systems. In fact, as we speak today, there's an American spacecraft built by Firefly that's doing orbit insertion around the moon. Hopefully it's going to land here at the weekend. We've got another one that's launching here on Wednesday that's, again, destined for the moon. That's a couple of things. They're Intuitive Machines, of course, their mission, but then There's a lunar trailblazer, which is an amazing satellite that's built out of and run out of JPL by Bethany Ehrman and that whole team that's really going to investigate volatiles and the composition of the moon. The moon is a witness to the early Earth. It doesn't subordinate itself to any other processes, and so learning about what that looks like teaches us about the origins of the solar system. That's just happening just a week. And then, at the end of the week, hopefully our partners at SpaceX are going to get another flight test off the ground. You guys have seen the amazing achievements they've done with booster reuse, even just in the early days for those missions. So that's fantastic. And just this week. And then at the VAB, which is where we're getting ready for the Artemis 2 mission, we just topped off the booster segments that we started stacking just a couple months ago. So the activity is there. Your question about like what it's encompassed. I mean, the agency's approach is very integrated in a lot of different ways. Specifically for this particular program, though, what they've asked, what Congress asked us to do and kind of integrate strictly is I would say the 6 Artemis. We have our ground systems program, SLS, Orion, the landing system program, Gateway, as well as suits and mobility, kind of into one big enterprise in order to achieve the Artemis test missions, which is basically the first phase of this kind of our moon to Mars evolutionary approach. And then as we use those and develop those components and test them, because again, it is a test activity more than anything, then we'll kind of evolve the architecture to foundational exploration and then beyond that. Because really that's always been the goal. The goal of the entire kind of process was to build a foundation for deep space exploration, to expand our range of action. And so that's what the test activity now is focused on. How it evolves, like you said, we'll see. We've got new leadership, and hopefully they've got new ideas about how to make those things more efficient. And I want to talk about that a lot. One of the reasons I was excited about coming here is so much of what we're working on, and so much of what on a daily basis we deal with are very common problems across the board in defense and in overall industrialization across the country. And so to me, our focus really this year and then kind of, is going to be working on those problems that are, in my mind, invariant under kind of these bigger architectural policy decisions that are going to come. And then when those come, we can adjust. But the invariance of our supply chain problems, of all the technical development we're doing, all of that is just in front of our face now. We're knee deep in development. We haven't done this much development as an agency in many years. You asked a few years ago what we were doing. I mean, we had the rockets in production. We had some of these things, but we did not acquire new landers, new suits, new additional capabilities. So that acquisition activity has kind of been really aggressive over the last 3-4 years since we got the original mandate, put boots on the moon in 2024. And so since then, we've just been, turning stuff on, trying to get things framed up, work on the integration exercises. You can imagine trying to integrate 6 programs that were acquired over a 20-year period is also challenging. The standards change, the approaches change. And so kind of getting that all together and getting that working has been just a huge effort for us.
So it's more than just Artemis.
Yeah. Yep.
Is it more than the moon right now, or is Mars too forward looking?
No. In fact, we have a Mars campaign office inside the program actually, and what that's a derivative of is work that we've been doing on Space Station for 10 years. Space Station was always an exploration test bed. And one of the biggest problem we have to solve, and this is something that has really, really been challenging, fortunately I was able to be part of it, is the evolution of the Space Station life support system and what it can do. Right now, based on the way we've augmented the systems and the improvements we've made on that vehicle, we can reclaim 98% of the water on board. I mean, that's everything that leaves the crew goes back to the crew. The entire airstring, we can revitalize the whole airstring. Those sorts of, and we built them in a way and we've augmented them to a design reliability of 3 years, which is kind of your nominal, with some fuzz, Mars transit time. So we have been very serious about building Mars-grade hardware in the agency for 6, 7, 10 years even. If you go back to when we finished ISS assembly, we had all the systems up and running, and then the first move after that was like, hey, we're done, we got it. And like, no, now it just starts. So now we got to use this vehicle for these things. And so through investments in ISS, through investments in cutting some of those technologies into even Artemis components, we're giving ourselves the kind of non-recurring engineering and all of that stuff that we would ordinarily, if you wanted to start from scratch, you'd have to do. We've been working on that throughout and infusing that into our programs the whole time.
So I have 2 toddlers now, so this analogy might not make sense to you, but so to me, I see a child learn how to do things, tell the alphabet, say the letters, spell words, spell their name. Do you view ISS, Artemis, are these all steps along that development that
Yes,
take us?
100%.
You mentioned deep space too, and so even beyond Mars, are we just kind of early in that journey?
It's I mean, to me, it's like in fact, this goes back to Apollo. What a lot of people don't realize is the architects of Apollo, Gilruth, von Braun, those guys, what they wanted to do before they went to the moon was they wanted to build a low Earth orbit space station. They wanted, because again, the approach was organic, right? It was, hey, we have duration requirements, we have these, freedom of action requirements, we have all these other things we need to do. What they really, really wanted to do was learn how to live in space for a long time before they then committed to lunar exploration, just because of all the reasons you'd expect. The logistics are more contested, access is harder, all of that. But they weren't able to do it because there were other reasons why they had to go fast. And so they went and they did those missions the way they did it. But then when we were done, we then fell back to what I would consider to be a more organic development process. We started talking about reusability, right? It was very clear to us after Apollo reusability was super important, which is why we built Space Shuttle, right? That we tried to do it in a way that made sense. Of course, you could argue how effective that was, but at the end of the day, the vehicle sitting in Udvar-Hazy flew to space 39 times, is reused 39 times. And so like that was the thing that we recognized as that evolutionary approach. Then we got to, okay, well, we have this capability, reusable access, let's start aggregating large hardware, let's learn how to do that. That's what space station's about. So it's kind of interesting now we're at a point where the original architects of Apollo would have felt comfortable doing what we're doing and expanding our range of action out further. And so but it's always been there. It's at some basic level, we've all sort of understood, what it's going to take, how harsh the environments are, how complicated the reliability of these systems are. All of them are must-work functions. You can't have a life support fault halfway to Mars. I mean, you're done for, right? So you have to have all of that potted, shakedown, reliability super high, vendor support, all of that there. And that's what we're trying to just build a capacity, right? I mean, to me, like I said, what we're working on is really invariant. Under those decisions, we can have a discussion about one versus the other, how we prioritize it. I think it's important that we do that. But right now, what we're really focused on is just spreading that capacity and building it across the country because we really need it.
Maybe, John, this is a good opportunity. So what's the role of U.S. industry? Amit talks about building capacity. I'm sure when it comes to bending metal, coding software, that's companies in a lot of cases doing that, and all the way down to the companies making the bolts or the screws. So how do you view that? What are you hearing from your members? How do they feel about Moon to Mars? What do they see as challenges?
I mean, I think clearly if you look at the list of companies that are involved in the program, I mean, there's a lot of excitement, right? I mean, this is a new growth opportunity for U.S. and international companies to participate, in the space industry. I think, as we were talking earlier, the challenge is, some of those technical capabilities that maybe those companies never had because they're new companies or they're heritage companies that, supplied, let's say, the, Department of Defense, NASA previously. A lot of those capabilities have atrophied, as Amit was saying. That muscle memory has been lost because, that the assembly line has, stopped or been halted for one reason or another. And worse off, we've lost a lot of those hands-on people who built valves, built those small components that are critical to a lot of the projects that Amit's running. And I think, what industry really needs to think about is how do they resurrect, those assembly lines and how to partner with government. Obviously these companies, there's concern that, budget, will the money be there, in 10 years as we, develop this program to fund, all this investment that they have to make up front. And how do they go out again and identify this new talent to again resurrect these capabilities? So I think these opportunities like this are great. NASA coming out and talking more to industry, so industry has a better understanding of what the government needs. And I think we talked also about some of the problems NASA has, DoD also has, whether it's a submarine or someone else. And I think if we could aggregate some of those problem sets, industry can, have more confidence that it can invest and solve some of those problems.
Is some of the issue that effectively it's a finite amount of resources tied to some of these activities, and since that customer really is the government in this case trying to do something new, is part of it that there aren't that many companies that are building things that also have a commercial application? They have to design something specifically for NASA or Moon to Mars?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think software is one problem. Hardware is a completely different problem. Software, talent, there's a lot of people, you have a much higher capacity workforce. I mean, if you're building ships, if you're building complex, sophisticated hardware, satellites, spacecraft, again, everyone I hear in this room is probably familiar with all the CapEx requirements there. A lot of risk to companies to take that, knowing that, there's one or two or three customers, and if something changes, budget or, whatnot, that company is going to be, in a world of hurt. So I think it's really interesting to think about. I think NASA's problems are not that dissimilar from, large weapons programs in the Department of Defense, and how do we aggregate those problems and needs that industry then can go and address, and again, have more confidence, bigger budget, better, hopefully, economies of scale for the whole government that each of the stakeholders gets more value from.
Tom, I kind of want to get your perspective just on the Hill. What are you hearing on there? How are these issues talked about? Moon to Mars, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. Maybe I'm just not on the in crowd. I just always thought Artemis. I thought specific missions that are going to Mars. I think of Mars sample return. I didn't think about it in terms of a campaign.
Yeah.
So I'm just from your perspective, how is it viewed on the Hill? Is it viewed more in that discrete buckets of activities, which admittedly that's how I viewed it, which I think isn't correct, or is it viewed as this kind of continuum of activities, like like raising a toddler to get to this final goal sometime in the future?
Yeah, I think if you go back and look at the authorization appropriations bills, going back all the way to the start of Constellation and the vision, Mars has been the end state goal, and we've called it a bunch of different things. It's been Journey to Mars during the Obama era, and then but really, if you look at the roadmap of what needs to happen and how we were going to go about doing that, it's largely been, everything Amit just said. And I think even the name Moon to Mars Program Office, that wasn't an administration or an administrator. That was Congress that named it a couple years ago in their authorization bill. So I think, it's interesting to me. It used to be, you go back 15 years, there was are you a moon person or a Mars person or an asteroid? I don't think anybody talks that way anymore, at least on the Hill. It's really, I want America to go and return to the moon first and stay in some manner, and then I want to be the first to go to Mars. And so I don't think the Hill largely, on both sides of the aisle, views that as an inconsistent position.
So your thought is that continuum of activities that builds up to deep space, hasn't really changed. That's kind of what it's been for the last few years on the Hill. It's probably what you'll see in the future.
It's that constancy of purpose. And again, you've seen that message in all of the NASA authorization bills, all of the appropriations bills. It's kind of remarkable because you have to go back to probably shuttle era to see a development program that has stayed as stable for us. You think about this. This started during the current kind of architecture, during a Democratic supermajority in the Senate and majority in the House and Obama White House, and then survived through Republican majorities in both chambers, the first Trump administration, the Biden administration. It's really been Congress, I think, and credit to, I think, President Trump in his first term and President Biden for not looking to do major disruptive things that's allowed us to get as far as we have, because we've been through sequestration, we've been through how many shutdowns during that time period, and yet we've seen this progression because of that constancy. And I think Congress has really led on that. And so as much as it's in vogue to knock Congress, they deserve a lot of the credit for keeping the focus.
And I don't want to put you on the spot on this one, Tom, but do you think that marching in step between Congress and the administration, do you think we'll see that going forward? Do you think it's a time where maybe there's an opportunity to really say the case for why things should continue the way they are, things should change, or do you feel like that's not necessarily what we'll see? We'll see kind of maybe a continuation of the past, that kind of alignment.
I think you're already seeing, I think people in general were thrilled to hear the president mention a civil space destination in his inaugural address. I think, but what you saw from the Hill almost immediately from the chairs and the ranking members is, yes, we want to go to Mars, but we're going to go to the moon first, and we're not going to lose focus on that. And similarly, as people speculate about architecture changes, you're already seeing kind of key stakeholders on the Hill going, yeah, but we're going to go to the moon first with what we have today, and as new capabilities come online, we're going to pursue that too. So I think you've seen the Hill has been burned so much through disruptive events that they're going, we came this far. It's like we've done Apollo 7, we want to get to Apollo 11 and then 12 and 13 and beyond. We're not looking to stop at 7.
I think I may weave in a question from the audience, and maybe this one could be for you, Amit, because it does relate to something that I was thinking it was worth asking. So, Moon to Mars program in its entirety, this is a huge development of space hardware, maybe even bigger than the ISS in some ways. You may be on the scale of Apollo, but in some ways not even, that's even too small to really think about it when you think about the reach of Moon to Mars. This question is from Gina Sanseri at ABC News. What is the most complicated technical hurdle? She says to land humans on Mars. So I think, looking out, if that's the ultimate goal, landing humans on Mars, there's a lot that's happening now.
Yeah.
So maybe there's an opportunity for you to just kind of walk us through, if that's the goal at some point in the future. What do you see now as right on the immediate horizon, right on your radar, pinging on there that this is a hurdle, and then maybe if you could kind of think about mapping that into the future, what else are you going to be thinking about? What are you going to be thinking about in a year that's a big hurdle? Or if you're on stage again in a year here,
I'll be saying the same thing. I'll tell you because the Mars landing problem is complicated. The transit problem is super complicated. The radiation environment's very severe. The life support problem, the reliability has to be super high. Your propulsion capability is not, we got to get better in all those areas. All of those things are hard. They're all hard technical problems, but we're Americans, we can solve those problems. We know how to do it, we just need time to do it, and we need the right sort of test bed to go do it, right? So that's true. It's going to take how long it's going to take. Now, I think part of the aspirational goal of saying, hey, we're going this place that's super far. I mean, 400 kilometers for LEO, 400,000 kilometers for the Moon, and 400 million kilometers for Mars. These are large step functions in terms of that, the geometry of that. This occupying that space around there, doing all that work is, it's really complicated. But what I would tell you is the real problem, the challenge, the absolute challenge for all of this is having an industrial base and having a technical base in this country that can do that.
So it's technical challenges, but really you're looking to the industrial base to help solve those.
It's capacity. And what I feel our job is right now, through the destination we picked, through the missions of record, regardless, no matter what we have to do, a mission that ambitious is not achievable with the industrial base that we have. We don't have the resiliency in the supply chain. We don't have the dissimilarity. We don't. And by the way, you guys talked about money before, and budget support, and we talked about changes. Maybe we don't want to change. What I would tell you is we have to change. We have to change the way we do business inside the program in order to make any of this work. And what I mean by that is focused on the way we are using the programmatic investment to as a catalyst for reindustrialization in these industries. That's what we need to be doing. And that's not necessarily a money thing. A lot of it is us getting better, the government becoming a better customer about acquisition reform actually happening in a way that's logical, and we can actually get things done, removing a lot of extraneous design and construction and reporting and other requirements, changing the way we do rapid acquisitions and prototyping, defaulting to commercial acquisitions when we need to do it, when it makes sense, when there's support for it. All of that has to happen in order for our agility to go up. Because the way we've been, like you talked about, old classic weapon system development, classic large system hardware development, has been the government as a single buyer saying, go build this. And what's changed and what's different now between what was going on before is that the capability in industry in a lot of different areas that I can't classically access is now eclipsed the government's ability to do some of that. And we need to transition our approach into taking advantage of that as part of this whole approach to doing that. We need that capability everywhere. And so what we've been working on, honestly, is inside the agency, one of the advantages Tom talked about the program, that increasing the decision velocity in the program is super important. And the Congress gave us the authorization to do it the way we did it, which was incredible for us to be able to actually manage risk across those lines and to sometimes reprogram dollars if we need to as we see things happen. That's not normal in the rest of the government. The amount of oversight required to do reprogramming, the way that the budgets are kind of laid out, the way the lines are non-consolidated, we have this morass of how that all works, and the program PEOs and whoever it is that's working on it are held to extremely tight constraints in terms of how they manage risk. The agency was able to we were able to get more flexibility from Congress because they liked what we were doing. They liked the risk approach we were taking. I think we need to do that everywhere. Right? We're trying to get more agile with the way we acquire things. We've been talking a lot about, and I think it's important we do talk about supply chain because that is the most important problem that I have, and also it's the most dominant intersection in this community that cares about all of security and all of what we're working on with where the capacity is in this country, right? It is, all I do is I'm on the road. I go to second and third tier suppliers all over the place. Everywhere I go, everyone is super passionate about the program. The program means something to them, to their kids, but they're telling me all the time they need certainty, they need some understanding of what we're doing. They also need relief in the ways we build and acquire things, the way we're levying bespoke specifications on them versus commercial specification. They need relief, and if we want that capacity to grow, we have to recognize that us as a customer, we're not being the best customer and we have to make that change in addition to beating the drum for, hey, we want certainty, we want alignment here, and we want to be able to work with the interagency and with industry and our partners across the world to get these things done too. So that is what I'll tell you next year when I come back, is that either the same thing we're working on is what we're working on today, which is building capacity across the country to enable sustainability. In space exploration is not about keeping people in space for a long time. It's about building production systems and having a production capacity in this country where we can tailor and do the missions we want to do when we want to do them. And people will say, well, how do we'll give examples of this. Low quantity runs, highly bespoke products. How do you do that? Well, there's lots of ways we can approach that, right? I mean, we could make advancements in how we do additive manufacturing. We could make that, but the government's got to give industry relief on specification. We can't say we have to do the things we normally do when we validate the structural capability of a piece of hardware. We have to do that, and that's all upfront work. That's all upfront work that I could just say, hey, I don't want to buy things like this anymore. I don't want to set this program office up like this. I want relief on these parts of the FAR that are really we did to ourselves. I want to change. We got to change all those things too. I mean, efficiency is the thing. So let's talk about how to do that. I mean, because it's really important and there's been a lot of, I think, really important discussion about it already. But that is, to me, 5 years from now, if I walk away from this program, I will not be happy if we reach the destination. I'll only be happy if, when I go across this country, I see these metal forges. I see these teams building electronics components, avionics, valves. If we have that, I think we will have done our job. And then the industry and everyone else can take advantage of it. You have the certainty of it. You have all of and we're really moving the ball forward in terms of our competitiveness internationally.
And I think this ties into a question from Alicia Brown from CSF. So I'm going to ask the question, but I'm going to kind of add my own thought to it too. But so when designing acquisition strategies and procurements, how does NASA ensure that multiple companies can compete and win NASA contracts? So maybe this is a question too for you, John, in a way. But so the question is, how do you design it to do that? But I also would ask, is that the goal? Do you want more companies involved in the supply chain, or do you want to just strengthen a smaller number? Or is this too in the weeds to really kind of suss out the right
answer? I don't know that you can, it's a one-size-fits-all solution. What I will tell you, though, is that in order to really get, we want competitiveness. 100% competitiveness over everything. That is how we're going to win, right? That's always been how we won. I mean, other countries in the world can outproduce us, but they're not going to out-innovate us. And the innovation comes from living in free and open societies and having these conversations and being able to challenge each other on how we do that kind of thing. But when we buy stuff, and when we're putting out acquisitions, there are inherent acquisition biases that occur. Even if you're totally above board and you're doing everything the same way, you're always thinking about a particular reference design, and you're thinking about, and that always impacts the way you think about the initial statement of work on a procurement. And there's ways we can get around that. There's ways we can fix that by, doing, buy before build, or we can do prototyping. We can enable prototyping in different ways to allow companies to propose innovative solutions that are separate from unique government specification, and then demonstrate equivalency. And if it works, great. Then we can provide some production certainty, and we can get to the end item. We need to be flexible in how we do that, as opposed to front loading all of these procurements. It's well, if you do this now, you have to show up and do this big design review with us, and you have to show up and do this particular thing with us. That's not what industry's doing. That's not the agility that they have. They don't do classic kind of waterfall development in the way that we've laid it in the agency. Those things have become, they're good for us, and each one of the processes we have, you have to understand, the way that these things aggregate over time. It was always a good idea at one point to do a particular thing. Put a reg in, put a process in, do a thing. But then after 10 years, you're I'm just doing the thing because people are doing it. We're not constantly evaluating the reasons why we have those things. And that's why the specifications get so big. That's why our processes and procedures get so big, because we don't know the root of why these things came from. Invariably, there was some problem that led us to that point, but we have to systematically evaluate and start dialing those things back, because a lot of what we do in terms of stockpiling, sustainment, acquisition capability, all of those, some of those things that are baked in to our acquisition regulations can be changed. A lot of them can be changed by the agency, and we have even supplements where we do things a certain way. We need to go through those. If we want to get that kind of competitiveness, where you get unlock real innovation, we have got to allow people to propose, really innovative solutions. We can't force them into, even though we think we're being fair sometimes, we still force them into our design or thought model about how things are done, as opposed to letting the competition play out early, letting some of those new ideas come in, and then boxing folks into a particular design solution. One of the things that that's happened in our industry that's been really good is you see kind of the work of some of these vertically integrated companies, how they do things. We need to do things like that from the standpoint of how we specify and how we actually write down what we want hardware to be. What we need to do is we need to prototype and build development hardware, and then we need to back ourselves into specification. We don't need to write up front and do all this work, and then all of a sudden we realize at 4 years into the process, by the way, this thing can't get built because we didn't think about this nitnoy thing, and then you can't get to manufacturing readiness. Now you got to redesign the whole thing, and you get overruns.
You know what you want.
Yeah,
you don't care how you get there.
Exactly. You just care about the end. You care about the end item. And so that's a huge part of that. But that is creativity and flexibility in how we acquire and how we specify.
John, how does that resonate or not resonate with you?
I mean, it resonates very well. I love what you said, Amit, about relief on specs. I mean, if you think, any RFI, RFP that a company you've worked with has responded to. I was at a semiconductor company years ago, the chip for the passport. We must have had over 20 people working on just the proposal for that. Completely over-engineered, overthought, overanalyzed, and it took years and years and years for the government to make a decision. And I think, to your point on it, it would make a lot more sense to have that engagement with industry. What's the problem you're trying to solve for? Yeah. And again, let industry come to you with solutions. And I love the idea about, some opportunities for prototypes. You see what works, what doesn't work, and then, iterate on that, and you fine-tune what you really need and what's going to solve that problem. I think most industry, and we represent some of the biggest companies and some of the smallest companies, and I think everyone agrees that the process takes too long, is frustrating, compliance goes way overboard there, and they'd like to see changes. And as I think about, this, where we are right now in the government thinking about efficiency, yes, I'm sure we'll find a lot of money and budget to save, but I'm particularly excited about how can we make these processes more efficient, particularly on the acquisition side.
Tom, do you have any thoughts about that? Making acquisitions different, more efficient,
better?
I
have a lot of thoughts. I think it's interesting. You're seeing a lot of energy in the Armed Services Committees in the House and Senate around acquisition reform and procurement processes. And I think there's a sense that, look, the cost of compliance, and having spent time working with both small companies and big companies, I think there's this misnomer, the big companies, they love all the FAR 15. They actually don't. They're just required by all their customers to carry it. So what they don't like is when other people don't have to go through what they have to carry with all the compliance costs. But, the government has a range of tools, and it's remarkable how little it uses them existingly today. I think about the FAR 12, commercial acquisition. So I get the benefit of the FAR with all the compliance stuff, but I can buy it like I'm buying a commercial item, and I can save about 20 to 25% in compliance cost. And the big guys can absorb that cost. What you're really getting to is the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, where they're going to choose not to participate in the supply chain for the government customer, which means that's how you get down to single string supplier with that higher cost because of that added compliance. And there's no bad intention here, right? It's everybody's learned from past problems and challenges and CYA stuff. But in reality, what you're doing is the government's collecting a ton of data that goes into a file and never gets looked at. And I think about in the 90s, you had the Paperwork Reduction Act and those things that put a cost of what does every form take you in time and money. I would really love to evaluate the compliance costs to the industry and to the customer, the government, of when we're required to put those things out, what are we buying and what's the real value of that? And can we offer some relief or flexibility there in exchange for going faster or bringing more suppliers in?
And it does feel like now in Congress and the administration, there is an appetite to look at a lot of these issues and maybe an opportunity to address them. And you mentioned for the defense community, national security reasons, but also for NASA and other agencies and departments that are doing cutting edge work that maybe have a little more different spin than if you're buying pencils or
those sorts of things are logical to have that, and we want to be. I think the intent, right? That's the important point. Is like when you think about these things, and I think about the people that it's their job to enforce these things. Again, these people are being told what to do, and they do their jobs well, and they're really trying to protect the taxpayer, right? But really the root of a lot of the reporting and the compliance stuff is transparency. People want their government to be transparent, which 100%. Like if I could tell you everything I'm doing, the problem is, in fact, I get balled up because of the compliance stuff. Actually, it prevents transparency in some cases. Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways if we use commercial software and other insight tools, et cetera, where you can see everything that we're working on. Yeah. And I'm happy to show my math because you guys would love the math that we're doing, right? Because we're building crazy things. I want to be able to share that every day. I would love to be able to tell the Hill every day what we're working on. That to me is super important. But there's a way to be transparent to have people understand what you're working on, and also not subordinate yourself to the comical thing is that you get so much compliance paper, you get so much acceptance paper, and you get so much other things that provide me the illusion that I have some control over the thing that I'm buying, that I can't actually look at it. I can't actually study it anymore. There's just
you'd have to put it into chat.
I'd have to get a tool to help me figure out what's going on. Which is not. So let's just use the tool to start with. Yeah. Is my point, right? If there's a tool that shows me this thing works, let's use those tools. And again, everyone that's working on even software inside and trying to provide that insight, again, they're trying hard, but they're handcuffed, right, by the kind of our procedures and how we do things. But I think it's super important when people hear me talk about, well, this guy doesn't want to audit-proof the agency. He wants to relax all the reporting requirements and just go, just get crazy and go. That's not what I want. What I want is everybody to know what we're doing. I just want that to be a kind of natural consequence of the fact that we're out there all the time talking to, the public and our taxpayers and our customers about what we're doing.
And I think there is a lot of contracting procurements that are done in more of a commercial way already.
Yep.
Tom, you mentioned a few. So that idea that you're doing something more on a fixed price basis, that's not new.
No.
And the paperwork requirements look a lot different for those.
But I'll tell you, Clayton, one of the things I noticed is that if you're getting more flexibility and reduced requirements, there should actually be more transparency. And right now what we have is carve-outs in the system. So we have OTAs, we have BAAs, we have all these things that all have their unique restrictions and protections and things like that. So ironically, the most expensive form of contracting gets you the greatest transparency, and the most flexible form of contracting gets you the least amount of transparency. And I think that's one of those things is if we could level the playing field for everybody, say let's reduce the requirements, let's increase the transparency. And there's a way to do this. You think we haven't done federal acquisition reform holistically since 1994, and we really haven't done it since the 1980s. And you think about how much all of our business practices have changed, how we even pay bills, how we do our own accounting. It's radically changed. There's a way to do this.
Yeah, I have to say, before we started this discussion, I didn't think one of the main issues would be too much paperwork for going to the moon and to Mars, but that's
real.
I appreciate learning something.
It's real. And it's really just it's all those things that, like we talked about, acquisition reform needs to be there, right? We really have to do that. And by the way, there's been a lot of smart people that have provided recommendations on how to do this. You just got to go do them, right? I really need to not just reform in terms of compliance, but also more innovative, more acceptable, fast acquisition processes, also super important. Encouraging competitiveness across the supply chain, and really in prime competition, but also supplier competition, is absolutely mandatory. And that doesn't mean, asking people to compete. It means I'm building large, complicated systems, right? They need to be sustained over decades. So I need to recognize that that's true, and I need to recognize that those systems need to be upgraded, that they obsolesce, that suppliers go away sometimes, and so I need the ability to have default, manufacturing rights capability. I need to be able to multiple source where I need it, where I have these, regions where I'm waiting on 3 parts in a 10,000 part assembly, which is all the time. But I need to be able to bring new entrants in and make it in their interest to hey, why would I want to go build 5 hydrazine valves for you? I can go do something else. Well, here's why, right? Here's a way that we can do it. Here's a way we can help subsidize that and or also provide certainty in other areas. That has to happen. The decision calculus has to happen. The government's going to change the way we the single buyer mentality and thinking about that single buyer mentality and how it propagates into how it's impacting innovation. All of the budget, the way we do the budget, and there's been the commission on PPE that's put a lot of great recommendations together on how to go do that. All of that is stuff we can do. All of it is in the trend towards efficiency and more efficient government, and also none of that costs money. That's just things we can do to be better, and we just got to go do those things. Now, nobody wants to sit there and think about what it takes to mod the FAR. I mean, and to do these. I mean, it's hard work. It's very tedious. There's a lot in there, but we can go do that. I mean, and I think that there needs to be really animated kind of approach there, because at the end of the day, what you will see is American businesses start rallying behind it, and they'll start investing in different ways when they start seeing that their government's actually thinking about, when I'm buying valves for Artemis, they also could be used in other areas. It's revitalizing these towns that have been, where their primary industries have been offshored. All of that will start happening, and that to me, like I said, that's the end state that I really care about at this point.
I think this question kind of relates. This is from Marsha Smith at Space Policy Online. To increase the decision velocity. Her question is, so it's related. So why did it take 2 years to figure out the Orion heat shield problem, and what does that say about that desire to increase decision velocity?
Okay. Well, it's a good question. I mean, I think there's multiple reasons why it's worth talking about why that investigation took the time that it took. First of all, the system itself is pretty complicated in terms of its interactions, the chemical changes that are going on between it. What was going on while we were working on those problems was two things. First, do we really understand the issue? And this is something from the agency's past. When things work, and they work really good. Like, we dropped the vehicle right on top of the fleet. Guidance converged perfectly. We had no issues. Bottom line temperatures were down the middle. In an earlier version of NASA, we would have said, hey, we're good. We flew it, it's good, we're done, right? That's the version of NASA that then normalizes foam strikes, that then normalizes booster blowby, that normalizes. So we're very careful about that, because it's usually a generation when those lessons get lost, and then we learn them again with ultimate consequences. So we don't like that. So we were very careful about making sure we understood the fundamental physics of the interaction, and we basically engaged on it wasn't just let's figure out how this happened, let's figure out how this design is interacting with the environment. Because we knew we had multiple ways to mitigate it. We just needed to understand the total interaction of it, right? Separately, what I really, really wanted to do, and I've seen this a lot in other programs, program managers will say, well, if you do this, you're going to have to change the design. We're going to be down for umpty years because it takes that long to go fix something like that. A, reject the premise. B, I don't care, get started. Right? Get started on fixing it, because if we're in a test activity, if we know exactly what happened, it's worthless if I can't apply lessons learned and go do it. So half of what we were working on then too was getting the production line up and running for that ablator material to make sure that if we decided to accept it, or if we didn't, we could cut it back into the design, right? So it was a lot of doing the work. The test activity took a long time because of, we don't have a lot of high velocity arc jets in America anymore. We only have a few. We don't have a lot of capability to stamp out this particular material. A lot of it's protected. So we were in parallel investigating the interaction between the hardware and the environment, and also coming up, once we realized kind of halfway through what was going on, how to invoke corrective action to then go cut in. And then at the end of the process, what we did was said, okay, listen, we have two options. Both of them are safe. One is fly as is. One is fix and change, because we knew, just fixing something itself in and of itself is not. You can introduce other unknown variables. So all that together, in parallel with the normal development and build of the spacecraft, the ML, everything else we're doing, kind of converged at that point. So I understand the optics of it. It looks like, hey, we weren't pencils down for 2 years. It took us that long to get all those things pounded flat so we could take a calculated risk at the end. So now, when I'm confident, because I know exactly what that assembly can do, I know exactly the environments it can tolerate and the ones it can't. I also know that if I have a problem, I can put in a new one. But all of that they had to convince me that it was safe to go do that. In fact, I was one of the, at the end of the process, I was kind of like, okay, we could do this, we can change the environment. But I really, at the end of the day, I would have much preferred to cut in the new design as fast as you can, because generally that's better from a development standpoint. But I also recognize but waiting longer and not putting the vehicle in the flight environment again, in a test activity, the pacing item is not something, it's the unknown. It's the things you're going to find when you go in the relevant environment. There's things you just have to go do. And so at some point, the risk on risk, we said, okay, we know how to control this. we really need to go fly because it's been, we got to get the rest of the data on life support, the rest of how the vehicle is going to work, and so that's where we got to. And I think it's fair. These things, if they could have gone faster, that's on me. But I mean, I thought we pounded it pretty flat, though.
I'll give you a break for the next question.
Yeah.
Plus, I want kind of a bystander view on this. So, Moon to Mars, how does that fit into the broader geopolitical considerations, like with competition with the U.S. and China or tensions with Russia? Just John or Tom, just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, was it last year, the year before, Intuitive Machines went to the moon? I mean, I think CNN and all the cable news networks broke into coverage. I mean, what unifies America more than a hockey game or something going on in space, right? I mean, I think with all this polarization we're seeing in the country, space is one of the things that everyone gets around and supports. So I think having this program, and as Amit laid out, there's a plan, there's a framework, there's processes in place. Maybe it not directly get to where it was expected when this first was started on the timeline, as it was articulated at, but there's a lot of energy behind that and getting out to the ultimate destination, to the moon and then to Mars. And I think it's a rallying point for America and for industry. And I think industry and the country is really, I think, invested in its success. And we need to have more of this dialogue to explain to people what's happening, why it's happening, and how we're going to get to our objectives at the time that we'll get there.
Yeah, I'd just say, I think one of the maybe most silly political things I heard was 10 years ago, President Obama, when they canceled Constellation, said, why do we need to go to the moon? We've already been there. But you think about it, of the, 7 or 8 billion people on the planet alive today, about 6 billion and change were not alive when that happened last time. So for them, we really haven't been there to witness it. It is the thing we look up in the sky and see every night that we relate to.
Are you saying it didn't really happen?
Well, I take it on Amit's good authority.
Yeah, we checked.
We checked. So I think in the eyes of the members of Congress, and I think quite frankly most people in government, they understand the geopolitical stakes here. Set aside national security, the soft power stakes of, you think about during Apollo, we were so behind the Soviet Union on just about every step along the way. And then, you get the lunar landing and then we go back and do it again. So it's not just a one-off. And it was a clear vindication, I think, quite frankly, of the American leadership model, innovation model, capitalist system, open system. We didn't hide our launches and failures. We showed them live on TV. So I think that's at stake. And I think intuitively most Americans and our allies around the world get that, which is why we've seen so much support for the Artemis Accords and our partners on Gateway and the astronauts. It's great that we have the Canadian astronaut on Artemis 2 and Japanese astronauts. I think it's an incredible tool of geopolitical influence and leadership. And I think that's why you see the members so defensive of doing this. Look, the moon and Mars, it's not for rich guys who can buy rides. There's something inherently American about people like us who become astronauts, who smart people like Amit and his team put on these amazing systems and send to do the most challenging things. I think it's just in the fabric of who we are, for better or worse. I think certainly for better, but that's why I think the idea that we're just going to skip it or we're going to say, well, we've been there, it just doesn't fly.
Yeah.
President Kennedy said it serves to measure us. I mean, he was very clear at Rice when he said that's what it does. To do something like this, it measures our capability. It measures what we can do. And like you said, I mean, if at the end of the day, like what we really need is the kind of reform I'm talking about, okay, great, but try and explain that to a kid. Yeah. Right, a kid who wants to be in the program, a kid that thinks the program's awesome. Well, the kid's going to think, okay, that rocket's amazing. They caught that rocket. They did this other thing. Wow, that's crazy. I want to be a part of that. And eventually they'll be a part of it. And then at the end of the process, they'll realize that the studying acquisition reform is probably the way to make this work. But you're not going to get them at the front end with that. Yeah. You're going to get them on the back end. Yeah, that's not a good hook. It's fundamentally cool, right? It's amazing. And I don't care if they come work in the program or if they work in other things. What I care about is that they believe that as citizens, we can work together on big things and solve big problems together. That's what I care about, because that's a gift we're giving to that generation. We're giving it in a way that through something so inherently motivational that shines the light on the world that America is, right? Well, with our leadership in the area, that's what it is. I mean, and we got to there's so much potential for exploiting that.
And we are working with international partners.
100%. We have been for 40 years.
Yeah, and this ties into a couple questions. I'll just kind of rapid fire to see if anyone's got any thoughts here. This is from Joel Graham at MBI. How can the U.S. replicate the success of the International Space Station working with foreign partners on Artemis and Mars goals? In my head, I immediately think of Gateway. So I'm tying it to this next question. It's from Stephen Clark at Ars Technica. What tangible benefits does Gateway offer from Moon to Mars? So they're looking at it from a flip side, but...
Yeah, no, it's right. I mean, the international component of it is huge. It is very true that one of the great advances, and to me, one of the great results of the station program is that partnership. And so, and cultivating that and making sure it endures. And it's not just the partnership of, hey, we all believe in these shared values, but we developed common engineering techniques. We developed, interoperability and other ways to live and work in space together because of that. And so extrapolating that to any aggregation platform with Gateway on the surface, et cetera, it enables and continues to expand that capacity worldwide. And at the end of the day, for really big, ambitious deep space missions, who knows, the Jovian moons, wherever you go, we need that. No single country can foot the expense of that, and we need to make sure that the entire world is spacefaring, and so building those norms and standards, developing that, curating that through the partnerships we have in the program now on Space Station, in the future on the existing ones. That's the critical piece of it.
And is it more about that partnership and the value to working together, or is there a capability in the case of Gateway?
There is. Gateway expands our endurance in these orbits, right? And also having presence in cislunar space is like, people think about, the gap between the Earth and the Moon is, okay, well, it's just space there. No, there's parts that are more valuable than others, right? Like parts that are determined by orbital mechanics that are useful for lots of things, right? And we want to have freedom of action and visibility in those areas, right? And so part of the idea of aggregating anything in cislunar space teaches us how to go do that. We have to transit the belts. We have to do a bunch of other things there. We have to have largely autonomous operations. So it changes our technical thought process about how to do that. But at the end of the day, cislunar space is filled with all sorts of important places, that are in equilibrium points between, Lagrange points, places where you can do low energy transfers between different orbits. We want those things. We want to know how to do that. We want to know how to navigate in those areas. We want to know how to exploit those capabilities for other terrestrial and surface application too. So all of that is good in the direction of goodness in terms of like picking out those areas that we know are going to be competitive, right? Because if we don't go, then okay, people aren't just going to be like, it's fine, let's just leave it alone. Like it'll be competitive for other reasons.
Thoughts on international partnerships, Gateway?
I've got a lot. I mean, I don't really get the Gateway hate. I've been thinking about it a lot over the years. It's not a program that I've ever had in my portfolio. But to me, if you think about at some point ISS will retire, Gateway with its international presence on it, and NASA's done a phenomenal job of bringing in the international partners on it, it is that extension of that international platform out there. I see it's in the grand scheme of Artemis Moon to Mars spending, fairly minimal part of the architecture cost, fairly maximal part of international partner contributions and involvement, and guarantees, one of the critiques after Apollo is we went and then we stopped going. A pretty good hedge against that is having Gateway there, to have a presence, just like ISS has been a great hedge to have a reason to keep going back to LEO and stay up there. So to me, it's a continuation of those intergovernmental agreements that we started with Space Station, but pushing it into the deep space environment. And to me, if you can continue to leverage those into the 21st century and beyond, that's going to be an incredible geopolitical tool for keeping this coalition of the willing going.
Well, and not to totally be the devil's advocate here, but I seem to do that sometimes. I'm a skeptic. But so Gateway, we knew how to do ISS with international partners. Was it just like, oh, well, we could do that in a lunar orbit? I mean, what's your thought on maybe a criticism of Gateway like that?
I think the international partnership element was probably emphasized because of the White House's lack of substantial interest in investing in it. But I think it actually worked out great because it asked the partners to come to the table with things like airlocks and with other modules. And I think it's actually been a real asset of the Gateway thing. So you think about it, we're getting the first ever lunar or deep space station for a fairly affordable value in the grand scheme of the architecture, with a number of international partners that doesn't distract at all from any of the Moon or Mars capabilities that we're developing. that just seems like good value to me.
Yeah, 60% of it's paid for by our partners too, which is important. I think that's important that's true. But I think just to pull a little bit on what Tom said earlier, though, I know that, sorry to jump on this, but building destinations, right? Building destinations in exploration in general is not just a 20th century thing too. And it's not, and it really, the evolutionary approach is something we did. I mean, in the West, we built forts so the railroads could be there. I mean, this is what we're doing. Nobody thought at the beginning of Space Station that because we built Space Station, we would have basically now captured the entire domestic launch industry. Yeah. That was a corollary benefit of that, right? Because we built a destination. That destination enabled, the private sector to come and say, hey, there's a place we can go, there's a service we can provide, we can go do this, and give them the ability to innovate, to give them a way to test that early market for their hardware. I mean, that's what we're doing the exact same thing. We can talk about commercializing low Earth orbit now in a fulsome way because we've had commercial partners that have been helping us provide and sustain low Earth orbit destinations now for 15 years. I want to do the exact same thing with lunar exploration. It's the exact same concept. Give us a place to go, let the government socialize the risk with our partners about how to go build those things. We'll learn how to do these things, that are unique about charge environments and, comms or whatever. We'll learn all those things. We'll give you surface access, et cetera, and then we'll move on. And then when there's a thing to go to, you can go to it if you want to. And people can go there and they can take advantage of it. If they don't want to, then fine. But the whole point is we're building forts, right, everywhere we go. And if you want, and the roads come afterwards, the industry comes afterwards, and where we expand our range of action, doesn't matter, out of the cave, across the ocean, up the mountains, every time we expand our range of action, there's economic benefit that results every single time. It doesn't matter what we do. And so that, we're just continuing what I consider to be the role of the government has played in manifest destiny for, since the beginning of this country. So like, that to me is a very logical way to just think about, okay, there's better ways to do it. I'm all ears about how to make things different, how to make things better, how to change things around. I'd love to have that conversation, but just not doing something is not. I don't know what to do with that. When I see the implicit benefit of what we're preserving as a part of it, and also what we're really trying to do in aggregate, which is lead the world. So I think it's fine to have the conversation, but let's do it on the merits of. What's it doing for us? What's the real business case for it? How are we working? Where do we think the investments are going to go? Actually, part of the reason why it's there in that particular orbit is because you can get out there relatively cheaply. Like we have, commercial launch access in different areas. It takes a long time. You got to spiral out there, but you can get there, right? And all of that access, all the transportation capabilities, part of what we want to build too. And our partners are doing the same thing.
Hey, Clayton, if I could just add one thing, a small but I think important issue here that's preventing, I think, from market from growing, and the Chamber wants more buyers and sellers in the market, both domestically and internationally, participate, and that's, I think a hindrance is the ITAR and export control issues that we have, and so we're very excited that the government opened up several rulemakings at the end of the year. We're very eager to see what changes are made. There's a lot of modernization and updates that we believe, talking to industry and the government, could be made that would allow for, again, more buyers and sellers on both sides to come to the market, to come to NASA and our international partners and provide new innovative solutions. We really need that to happen quickly. It's taken too long to get this rulemaking out to the public, and we're, again, eagerly hopeful that we'll see some substantive changes out of this process.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and something that I think, it's easy to forget how much of a barrier that can be sometimes.
Well, we were in the Gulf.
Collaboration.
We took several companies at the end of last year to the UAE and heard time and time again that, their partners in that region that may want to do business with the U.S. government or U.S. companies, and just as soon as they hear the word ITAR, they just realize it will never happen. Yeah. It's a dead end.
Well, we're about at time. I think I'll just kind of toss out one last question for everyone. Maybe end a little hopeful, what we should be looking for in the next year, what we want to see. So I think my question would just be, what do you want to see happen with the Moon to Mars in the next year? And I'll say hope. I know it's dangerous to hope for things, but what do you hope to see? And maybe Amit will start.
Well, I think we will see. I think we'll see the new leadership team come in. I think I'm very optimistic about how passionate the team is about this area. I really think it's going to be awesome to have that, to have the leadership, to have the president backing it, to have the Congress backing it to give us that direction, whatever it might be. I think we can be flexible, but at the end of the day, I think we're going to get, we're going to get more energy behind trying to get these things done, and then it's just about our performance, and it's about collaborating with the rest of, everyone that's involved in these programs to really focus on, I don't want to have any discussions about, everything we're doing is great, just leave us alone and let us do our work. That is exactly the wrong answer. There is so much room for us to get better, to get more efficient, to get smarter, to bring in more capability, to spread the capacity all over the place. So I think you're going to see it because we're going to be running around. You're going to see a lot of industry kind of pop up and say, hey, we're building this stuff for these missions. It's great. And you're also going to see a lot of progress. You're going to see test flights at Boca Chica. You're going to see test flights at KSC. You're going to see hardware coming together at, all over the country.
I mean, Artemis too.
Oh yeah, it's coming, and we're going to stack. And what we want again, what we really, really want is we want an armada of American vehicles going to the moon and going to Mars. That's what we want, right? That's what real capability looks like. And that's what I think we can do uniquely that none of our competitors can do. They can stand up one shot. They can stand up a thing to try and replicate what we did 60 years ago. But only we can do what we're trying to do, which is about markets. It's about competition. It's about bringing multiple entrants in and bringing the entire force of American industry to bear, not just specific pieces of it. And so that I'm very, very hopeful is going to be the kind of the energetic kind of spike that we get this year with the new team coming in.
Tom, what's on your mind?
Well, being an old appropriator, I always like to go back to the numbers. So I look at the value of what we're getting right now. We're spending like 1/5 the amount of money, inflation adjusted, on all the Artemis architecture that we did on Apollo. And granted, we have a lot of learning from Apollo we gained. But if you go back even more recent in modern human spaceflight history, if you go back 30 years, we were spending inflation adjusted about $12 billion a year on just shuttle and space station. So just LEO, one platform, one mode of transportation. Today we're spending less than that inflation adjusted for 3 cargo vehicles to LEO, 2 crew vehicles to LEO, a very mature and robust space station.
A partridge in a pear tree.
A crew, a soon-to-be crew validated deep space exploration rocket and spacecraft and ground systems, a lunar space station, multiple lunar landers, spacesuit, you name it. It's an amazing bargain we're getting. And I hear all this conversation, this program's so expensive. You're like, we got to go back and look at the numbers. We are getting incredible value compared to even 30 years ago. So that's my biggest takeaway. I'm very hopeful about it. I just wish, maybe it's an American tradition that we're always very self-critical of our government and our spending and our programs and our plans, but man, oh man, we're doing really well and we have a lot to be excited about.
John, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, Amit, just talking about obviously some efficiencies in our processes, but I grew up in Buffalo, New York, a manufacturing town, and to see a Rust Belt city like that resurrected because, that skilled labor comes back, there's more opportunities for people. You don't need a 4-year master's in aerospace engineering. You need to have a trade and a skill that's incredibly important, and the pride you take that you build a valve that went in a spacecraft or a submarine or another piece of, you built something. I think it's wonderful, coding and software and whatnot, but I think there's something really special about building a product that goes to a national goal, and I'm really excited to see how that evolves over the next few years, particularly with this administration's focus on bringing back manufacturing to the United States.
I'm going to ask myself that question, what I'm most excited about. I'm excited about all the activity. It's a really neat time to be.
Yeah, it's not dull.
I mean, to your point, we have Firefly Lander, we have Intuitive Machines, we have Astrobotic, we have a lot of other companies too that are doing baby steps, you could say, on the way, plus the big steps coming up. So all of that just seems like a really exciting time to be involved in space, and I think kind of having that ultimate goal as Mars is super. I'm super jazzed about that too, and it sounds like that's what it's always been.
The nominee said it. He said it during one of the commencement addresses he gave recently. That is a golden age. That he's just so excited that's where that's what you're talking about.
Exactly.
It is a golden age, and I think he's right. And if he brings that energy, then it's going to be awesome when we talk next year.
Jobs around the country. Yeah. I mean, it's just a really exciting time, I think, for people, not just in DC, not just where NASA centers are, all around the country who are involved in this. So think, ending on that hopeful note, hopefully if you do come back, Amit, in a year,
Yeah,
we'll be
would
talking
love it.
about the
I'd
cool
love to.
stuff that's
Yeah,
happened
yeah.
in the last year. So thank you, everyone, for being in person and for online. Really appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed being
Thanks.
here.